saw darkness run for cover, but the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. I believe in signs and wonders, I have resurrection power. Still the miracle that I just can't get over, my name is registered in heaven. Oh, my praise belongs to you forever. This is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Come together, sons and daughters, bought with blood and washed in water. Sing the praises of the Spirit, Son and Father. Our God will finish what He started. Oh, our God will finish what He started. This is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. This is my testimony. Testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'm justified. This is my testimony. Oh, I'm alive. This is my testimony from death to life, 'cause grace rewrote my story. I'll testify by Jesus Christ the righteous. I'll testify. This is my testimony. This is my testimony.
season to be jolly. Fa la 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 la. Sing with me, take to the world. Fa la 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 la. Sing the ancient Christmas carol. Fa la 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 la.
As you might imagine, I'm kicking off a new teaching series for Christmas this year. Now, here's the thing about teaching, right? Like, you can probably imagine this is one of the biggest jobs that I have. And I feel a little bit like every Thursday night, my term paper is due. Like, it's a lot of work. So, I'm always reading and researching and listening and thinking and trying to come up with what's next. And that's fine, right? That's fine. So I embrace that role. I try to do a decent job at it. But then Christmas comes, and I have a little confession to make to you. One of the things that gets at me about this time every year is like, oh, another Christmas series. And honestly, I'm not always excited about the series that we're going to do at Christmas. Because as hard as it is to come up with kind of new, fresh, decent stuff, week in, week out, like Christmas, I don't know if you've noticed this, it comes every year. And then we usually do 4 weeks about it. I'm like, what am I going to do this time? But I got to tell you, in a season that I think we carry a lot and maybe is more stressful, maybe more beautiful also than other seasons, I had something strike me this year that kind of inspired me to do this series called Travel Light. And it all comes out of this idea that what if we could walk out of this season of the year feeling lighter, feeling more refreshed going into 22 after this December rather than feeling heavier. And I think there's a pathway to it, and I think the Christmas story helps us see why we would do that. Now, I have friends in our church who travel a lot for work. They're probably in airports like every single week, flying everywhere. For my sake, I got to tell you, I'm glad that is not my life. I would hate to be traveling around all the time, everywhere. I'm a person who probably takes, maybe 10 flights a year. So it's not nothing, but it's not everything. And I remember when I started to travel a little bit more, I had somebody tell me who traveled a lot. They said, Greg, there's one rule if you're flying, at least one rule. The rule is nothing more than a carry-on bag. Nothing more than a carry-on bag. Some of you follow this rule. I came to it a little bit later, but when I came to it, I first thought what everyone would think. They're like, well, how am I going to do that, right? And the guy told me, he's like, well, there's basically 3 categories of things you would take on every trip. There's the things you need. There's the things you probably don't need. And in the middle of that, there's the things you might need. And he said, the way that I do this, so I travel only with a carry-on bag every time I go, is I take the things I need. I do not take the things I probably won't need. And I don't take any of the things I might need. And I thought, that's brilliant. I'm going to travel forever just with one bag through the airport, never standing in a line to check a bag, never having to get my bags lost. My bags are always with me. I'm going to travel with one bag. And you might think, well, of course you can do that, Greg, an overnight trip, no problem. But I got to tell you, I went to Europe this past May for 6 days, and I took a carry-on bag. Now, I get pushback on this from time to time when I try to be an evangelist for this sort of thing with my friends. And one pushback I get goes something like this. Well, Greg, you're a guy, right? I'm like, fair enough. So ladies, I'm not telling you that you should do this. It's a different world, possibly. The second pushback is, but Greg, what if you need something? What if you need one of the things that you might have needed on the trip? And I'm going to answer that question for you. Get this. If I need something that I didn't take on the trip, I figured out you can buy it. Wow. Right? You can actually buy it. And usually it costs me $10 or $15 or 20, maybe $50 once. But here's what I've noticed is out of all the traveling that I did, a lot of times, like I would say probably 1 out of every 20 trips, 5% of the time, I would think, oh, I wish I had something I didn't need, and I have to go buy it. And 19 times out of 20 trips, I didn't need it. And this is the irony for me. When I come across people who can't imagine just traveling with one bag that they carry on whenever they travel, I always ask them why. And their answer, get this, their answer has something to do with peace of mind. Because to them, in the way that they've calculated, maybe you, the way they've calculated so far, they think, oh, I can have peace of mind by taking everything with me that I might need. That way I don't have to be afraid that I won't have anything. Of course, those are the same people dragging bags through the airport, standing in lines to check bags, having all this sort of stuff. And it's true, isn't it, that the actual pathway to the thing they're looking for, peace of mind, is to travel light. It's just a miscalculation. And so I think as we step into this Christmas season, if I could help you on this journey through life to carry less and travel lighter, it would be a gift to you and to all of us. And maybe Christmas 2022 is the time that that can happen. We think about this life as a journey. One of the things the scripture says is this world is not our home. Some of you know the old song, this world is not our home. I'm just passing through, right? And it's interesting. It says we are looking forward to our everlasting home in heaven. And I don't know if you know this, a little Christmas fact for you. A lot of times churches will refer to this season as Advent. We don't use that language very much, but it's kind of a beautiful idea. And churches that do Advent leading up to Christmas, everyone thinks that Advent is about Christmas, about Jesus coming to earth. But that's actually not what Advent is about. The idea of Advent is living in anticipation of the idea that Jesus will return to earth one day, and that one day then we'll look forward to our everlasting home in heaven. And the whole idea is that the place we're at right now in this world, it's a temporary place. Heaven will go on and on and on and on forever. Our time here is so short, we're just passing through. And what I want to encourage you to think about is, as you're passing through, what do you want to carry with you through this life? Now, this phrase is as simple as it gets. Life, of course, is better with less of what doesn't matter and more of what does matter. Nobody in the room is going to argue with this. This is the simplest sentence I could have written down. Life is better. It's better. You have a better life if you have less of what doesn't matter and more of what does matter. Now, the truth is, everyone agrees with this. And then most people get late in life and they look back and they're like, why did I do so much? Why did I spend so much? Why did I give so much attention to things that don't actually matter? And why didn't I pour myself into, spend my money on, arrange my life on the things that do matter? We all know it's true that the challenge is to rearrange our lives in that sort of a way. And so I'm going to encourage you over the next few weeks to travel light this Christmas. As I go through life, probably like you, I accumulate things. And it's really the story of traveling with a carry-on bag is just a metaphor for life, because what I accumulate are hurts. And I accumulate frustrations. And I accumulate angst. And I accumulate regret. I accumulate all those things. And I think, but what if this season is actually the season to shift some of that? And so over the course of these next 4 weeks, I'm going to ask you to stop accumulating and actually let go of distractions. I'm going to ask you to stop accumulating and in this Christmas season, let go of bitterness. Is it possible you could be less bitter at the end of this month than you are right now? I'm going to ask you during this season to let go of and stop carrying your sense of control. This is actually the Christmas Eve message for us, where we remind ourselves that the government isn't on our shoulders governing the world, it's on his shoulders. And today I'm going to spend a little time talking about letting go of our stuff. I figured I should probably do that at the start of the series before we get all of our spending done for Christmas. Now, here's what's tempting to think when it comes to stuff. It's tempting to think, to be happy, I need things I don't have. That's a great temptation. Now, let's talk just a little bit about this idea of temptation. Temptation, of course, is the precursor to sin, right? And this is a little theology for you today. Most of us think of sin as the thing I did wrong. But the whole idea of sin from the scripture standpoint isn't so much the thing I did wrong, but that I missed the mark. The idea is that I aimed wrong. And when I followed my wrong aim, then it ended up with brokenness, either for me or for someone else. That's the whole idea of sin. But when you back up one step before sin, you get temptation. We're prone to be interested to aim at the wrong thing. And, last series, I spent all kinds of time talking about this origin story in the garden with Adam and Eve and shame and guilt and nakedness, all that sort of stuff. But right in that story, there's the evil one. And he comes up to Adam and Eve before they've ever done anything wrong, and just with a slight suggestion, he says, Did God really say, don't eat from the fruit of that tree? And of course, this is how the evil one actually works in your life and in mine. He doesn't usually announce himself as the evil one. Hey, just so you know, I'm trying to steer you off course, crash your life, and make you miserable. He doesn't announce it. He usually says something like, God really say? I know you're thinking this way, but what if you thought this way? What if I could take the aim of your life and just adjust it a little bit? And then when you pursue the wrong aim, it's tempting and it leads to things. And that's really what this is. To be happy, I need things I don't have. It is tempting to think that this is true. You could put other words in here. You could say to be satisfied, I need things I don't have. To be fulfilled, I need things I don't have. To be secure, I need things that I don't have. But none of those, of course, are actually true, even if we believe and behave as if it is true. In fact, it's possible that the exact opposite is true. That if you and I could retrain our minds and not be so concerned about accumulating things, because that's what we think would bring us happiness or security or satisfaction. It's possibly true that to be happy, I don't need things. And what if we set our aim on that? And of course, we know that it's true. You have more things. Most of you have more things than your parents did. And for some of you, your parents are happier than you were. Almost all of us have more things than our grandparents did. But for some reason, it seems like my grandparents were happier than most of my friends and neighbors these days. That somehow in our minds, it's been tempting to think more things will make me happier, when Jesus actually taught the opposite. And of course, the Christmas season has some of us diving all in on things. So let me just sit for a moment here with actually the wisdom of Solomon. Solomon wrote some books in what we call the Old Testament. One of those books is the book of Ecclesiastes. He opens the book of Ecclesiastes by saying, meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless, life is but a chasing after the wind. And when he says that, you kind of picture like, oh yeah, chasing after the wind. That nothing more meaningless than that, right? There's something out there that you chase, but you'll never catch it. It's meaningless. And he writes for a little while, and he comes to Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And this is what he says in Ecclesiastes 4. He says, better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Now, a little insight into my life and the things I like. I'm pretty sure the greatest candy on the face of the earth is peanut M&Ms. Who's with me? Peanut M&Ms. All right, good. Got some friends. You may have noticed that I actually have a bowl of peanut M&Ms sitting right here, right now. Actually, just so you know, this bowl was full until the worship team had their rehearsal, and apparently they were hungry. So that's great, right? And I don't know if you know this. This has definitely been my experience. I had an assistant once a few years ago, and she would always put candy in my office, kind of as a hospitality for people I'm having a meeting with, or that sort of thing. And she found out that I liked peanut M&Ms, and she would just fill this bowl and about this size in my office with peanut M&Ms. And I always thought, like, hey, one peanut M&M is good. 2, fantastic. Wouldn't 30 be better? All right? And if you've sat with an open container of M&Ms, you're like, yeah, it just kind of keeps going. But what you also realize is that 1 is good and 2 is pretty great. And 30 is miserable, right? But there's something inside of us. I mean, we're Americans, right? So 2 is always better than 1. If $1 is good, $2 has to be better. If 1 car is good, 2 cars is better. If 1 vacation is good, 2 vacations is better. It's just, I mean, it's almost un-American to think any other way, except that Solomon does think another way. He says, better 1 handful with tranquility than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. In fact, I think we should try to memorize this verse together tonight. I think you should let this verse shape your whole Christmas season. And it's very easy to memorize. I'm going to say short parts of it. You're going to repeat it after me. Here we go. You ready? Better 1 handful with tranquility than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Let's do that one more time. I'll say it first. You repeat after me. Better 1 handful with tranquility than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. And we know this, right? Because if I have 1 handful, peacefulness, contentment, joy, patience, love, like life is good. I'm not saying have nothing. I'm saying have 1 handful. But if I have 2, then actually what happens is the way I got to is I had to toil. It was striving. It was angst. It was work. And work is good if it pays off, but work is not good if you work and then you realize, I'm chasing the wind. I have 2 handfuls, but it's meaningless to me. Actually, 1 handful is better than 2 handfuls. And so I'm going to ask you this Christmas to think about this and travel light. So let me be as practical as I can be about this for a few moments and then lead you to an ultra practical piece. There are 3 things that I think we can do this season to gain this tranquility. And for tranquility this Christmas, let's start with this. Aggressively reduce your stuff. Your stuff. All right, I'm going to take you on a little imagination tour through your house. Okay, maybe you're like me. Our son is coming home from being in the Marines. He's finished up his 4 years. He's coming home. We thought, oh, you know what? We're going to redo his bedroom before he comes home. So we need new carpet in that bedroom. And then after we did, thought, carpet in that bedroom, then we should probably do it in the hall. If we're going to do it in the hall, we should probably do it on the steps and then in the other bedrooms. And so we pretty much redid the carpet in our whole house. And then, when you're going to do the carpet, you might as well paint, right? You don't want to put in new carpet without painting. So it always kind of multiplies. But the beautiful thing about doing carpet is you have to take everything out of a room and you don't have to put everything back, right? And so I'm actually going to give you a little assignment I'm just going to give you 48 hours. We can do 48 hours. You'll be done by Saturday night to get rid of some stuff. So go on this imagination tour with me. I want you to picture your closet right now. Is your closet 1 handful or 2? Let's go to your garage for a moment. Is your garage 1 handful or 2? 4, thank you. Let's go to your bedroom. 1 handful or 2. Your living room, 1 handful or 2. The toy room that your kids have, 1 handful or 2. The storage unit you pay money for because you have too much stuff, 1 handful or 2. And I just want to think, maybe in the next 48 hours, you could just get rid of a bunch of stuff. Your closet, and your garage, and your bedroom, and your living room, your toy room, maybe even your storage room. It could just become 1. And you think, well, how would I do that? And the answer is, well, you either give things away or you throw things away. And this is a very powerful concept. I tell the story of Jesus all the time. Jesus once had an encounter with a guy who's described as a rich young ruler. But by rich young ruler, it just meant he had lots of stuff. Lots of stuff. And he's kind of didn't want to let go of his stuff. If he was listening to this message right now, he'd be like, yeah, Greg, I got 2 handfuls in my closet and my garage and whatever, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going down to 1. This is actually what the encounter looked like. Jesus said, just sell everything you have and give it to the poor. Then you'll have treasure in heaven. Because remember, we're just passing through. We're just passing through. This world is not our home. And what would it be like if instead of having 2 handfuls, you had 1 handful, and then you took the other one and you gave it away? Or if it's junk, you just threw it away. What about that? He said, then come and follow me. And when he heard this, he became very sad because he was very wealthy and he wasn't willing to let go of his stuff. And I just want you to imagine, what would life be like if I just had less stuff? I'm not talking about decluttering and organizing. I'm talking about de-owning. Just getting rid of it. People, of course, come to me and when I suggest this, they're like, well, 2 big problems with that, Greg. First of all, the first problem is a little bit of fear, right? Because the fear is, what if I need it? It's actually the same question that gets asked about a carry-on suitcase on a trip. What if I need it? Some people even will justify it as a follower of Jesus. I'm being a good steward. I'm holding on to things in case I would need it later so I won't have to buy it. But I'm always like, is that good stewardship? Or is actually the good stewardship to say, hey, actually, I'm just passing through less stuff? Why wouldn't I give things away? Well, I was at that stage in my life once, so I can just tell you my reason. The reason I won't give things away sometimes is because I think I might need them later. And I think what I'm doing is not trusting God that if I need them later, I can buy them later. There is, please don't miss this. We're followers of Jesus and we're trying to live the life Jesus lived. There is a certain element of simplicity and minimalism that is the way of life. And especially if we have more than we need and someone else has what they don't need, better is one handful. Feel free to eat that.
I'm okay.
Greg, you've touched it 6 times now, so I'm not eating that. Fair enough. But just think, if you have 2 handfuls and somebody else has no handfuls, I don't know how the follower of Jesus comes to the conclusion, yeah, I think I'm just going to keep it in my closet. I'm just going to keep it in my garage. I'm just going to keep it. And of course, the beauty is, life is better when you have more of what matters and less of what doesn't matter. Here's number 2. For tranquility this Christmas, only add meaning. So we're giving stuff away, we're throwing stuff away, and all we're doing is adding meaning. I tried to be creative in the way I wrote this, but I was actually just in my office about a half hour ago. I'm like, I should have just said, don't buy stuff. Because that's what I mean, right? Or buy less stuff. Because stuff is the thing that catches us. You know, Jesus, this is one of the strongest statements Jesus ever made in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12. He starts out by saying, watch out. Okay, that's strong. And then he says, be on your guard. Like, man, he must be serious. I wonder what he's going to say next. What is the thing in our life that we would have to watch out for and be on our guard about? And the answer is, you need to be on guard against all kinds of greed, because life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. And of course, I think you and I generally agree that's true. We don't feel life in the abundance of our possessions. And yet, I don't know if you know this, 62% of people admit to the idea that the experience of shopping gives them a temporary high. Just the idea of looking and buying and expressing and doing that, it gives them a momentary high. And it is the tempter that says, oh, this is going to satisfy me. But then routinely what happens after that temporary high is actually a long-term regret. And the long-term regret goes something like this. I just bought stuff I didn't need with money I didn't have. Sometimes to impress people I don't even like. Why buy more stuff? And so I'm not telling you not to spend money this Christmas. Actually, not at all. Let me be crystal clear about that. I think you, as a follower of Jesus, probably ought to be the most generous of gift givers in your family and in your circles. Like, please go for it when it comes to doing gifts. But I'm going to suggest to you that what we're aiming at here is meaning. Maybe the best way to describe meaning is to use the word memories. And you know, almost never can create meaning and memories with stuff. What does this look like? I don't have the perfect answers. I have some things that we're doing. I'm kind of hoping that my mother and my in-laws aren't watching online right now, because I'm about to tell you what I'm getting them for Christmas. But here's what it goes like. It's not stuff. Talking to my mom, she loves this ancestry thing, ancestry.com. Like it brings meaning to her to kind of look back at the ancestors. It's a way to spend some of her time these days. She loves to tell the stories and find out what happened. Like it means something to her. It's not stuff. It's like, all right, mom's getting a subscription to Ancestry. My mother-in-law, she loves a good Broadway show, right? I'm like, oh, this is going to be perfect because we can buy a ticket to a show in Chicago and she can go with her daughter, with her granddaughter. And like, what an awesome weekend that's going to. This isn't stuff. This is meaning and this is memories. And my father-in-law, so I should tell you about my father-in-law sometime. He's a sinner. Because he's a Cubs fan. Fair enough.
Absolutely.
And just think about this with me for a minute. I want you to witness the level of sacrifice I'm willing to make for the good of my father-in-law. Right? I'm going to buy tickets to a Cubs game. Right? And I'm going to take my father-in-law to a Cubs game along with two of his grandsons. And I'm hoping that not just the Cubs game, but maybe dinner together, maybe even a night overnight. And maybe we could seed it a little bit with, I would love for my sons to hear the wisdom of their grandfather. And I would love for him to think a little bit about sharing that. I'm like, oh, if giving the gift of a Cubs game could create a memory or a conversation that has meaning, what if we thought about almost all of our gifts in that way? You think about the most meaningful gifts you've ever received. Chances are they weren't stuff. I brought with me tonight the most meaningful gift I've ever received, hands down. About a year and a half ago, my wife gave me this gift. I don't know how much it costs, probably $10, I don't know. It is a little pill jar, and inside each one of these pills, if you open up those pills, there's an individual note written in every one from my wife and from my kids, telling me something they're grateful for about me. Do you know how many times I've opened up these pills, read those notes, put them back? I'd be embarrassed to tell you. But it's not about a thing. It's about a thought, about a meaning, about a purpose, about an experience, about a memory that can be created. And I really want to encourage you that when you start to think about your gift giving to the loved ones in your life and the people who are around you, that you would mark it with meaning, not with stuff. Because I promise you, life does not exist in the abundance of possessions. But life actually does exist in the abundance of memories and meaning that we would share it with those that we love. Last, for tranquility this Christmas, of course, be generous and willing to share. Generosity and willingness to share is, I think, a mark of the Christmas season for those of us that follow Jesus. And if you've been around very long, you know I say essentially the same thing every year when it comes to asking you to prepare for this compassion offering that we're going to have on Christmas Eve. This is the simplest framework to me. I just say, hey, however much you're going to spend on all the other people in your life who probably don't need anything, just take that same amount and make sure you give it to our compassion offering so that the work of God can flow through that and serve needs that are all around us. And it is absolutely the perfect weight of balance. Because if you sit there and think, Greg, I could never give that much to a compassion offering, I'd be like, well, how much are you given in Christmas gifts? And it just scales beautifully because you might be a person who'd say, Greg, I'm not going to spend more than $50 total. I can't afford it on Christmas gifts. I'd be like, that's great. Then just give $50 to the compassion offering. And some of you are like, well, I'll probably spend about $500 on Christmas gifts this year. I'm like, that's great. Then how about $500 to the compassion offering? And some of you would be like, I'm actually spending like $5,000 on Christmas gifts this year. And I'm like, well, if you have the means to do that, how awesome is that? Genuinely, it's awesome. Just make sure in the spirit of that same season that we're generous and willing to share at the same scale to help people who are in need, rather than just loading up people who don't need a thing with more stuff. You know, I did a series a number of years ago. It was called How to Be Rich. And kind of the theory of it is, well, if you ever become rich, you'd want to be good at it, wouldn't you? I mean, maybe all of us know a rich person and we think, they're not very good at being rich. Like, they're rich and they don't share anything. They're rich and they use it all. They're rich. Like, we should know how to be rich. And the whole passage, the whole series was based on this passage. It says to guys like me, Greg, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth. Now, of course, part of the challenge of this is almost all of us read this and we think, well, it's probably not talking to me because I know rich people, those people. But of course it is talking to us. I mean, we can acknowledge this, right? We're all rich. Your closet and your garage and everything, it's two handfuls, right? Actually, the definition of rich is I have more than I need. That's what rich is. So this is to us. Don't be arrogant. Put your hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but put your hope in God, who actually richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment, to make some memories. You shouldn't feel guilty about spending some money to enjoy this life with other people. Just don't buy stuff. Make sure you're aiming at enjoyment. Then it says this, command them, it's my job to command any of us who are rich, to do good with your richness, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. And I really want to ask all of you as we step through this Christmas season, because I think you'll get to the end of December and you'll feel lighter about your stuff, to, of course, eliminate stuff. Don't buy things, but aim at meaning. And then make sure this season you are generous and willing to share. You probably have to think about this like I do, but if you think back through your life and think, man, when was there some emotion? When was there some heart attached to gifts or things that were experienced? I can't honestly think of a single time I gave something a thing. I gave someone stuff, and there was emotion attached to it. But I can think of lots of times when I decided I was going to trust God and not trust myself. And I just had to be generous and willing to share. And I'm like, man, that shaped my life. I was 19 years old. I was at this event where someone stood up and they were talking about the difference they were going to make in these children's lives. I could go into the details, but I'll just say this. I was 19 years old, and there was something inside of me that said, Greg, you should give $200. And I didn't have much more than $200 in my account at that day. And I'll never forget it. It was just kind of this wrestling match inside, give $200. Give $200. And so I wrote a check. You guys know what checks are? Yeah, yes. Back in the 1900s, we had checks, right? Wrote a check for $200, and I think, I'll never forget that feeling. When Jenny and I were, childless and had a little extra income, and we were both working, and we had a car. It's time to get a new car, and we just kind of thought about it, prayed about it, talked about it, and thought, you know what? Instead of trading this car in and getting the money for it, we know somebody who's in. How about we just give this car to them? And I'll never forget when they got that car. I'll never forget all the times I saw them driving it after that day. And I thought that's where the emotion is attached to me. To be willing, to be generous and willing to share. And honestly, I'll never forget the first time that Jenny and I decided we were going to give as much to the compassion offering as we spent on Christmas gifts. It was a big number. And it was so right. And it was so awesome. So, of course, this is the point. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil chasing after the wind. You can appreciate the beauty of this, right? I want you to have the picture of this in your life. What happens when you just have one handful? Well, when I have one handful and someone else is down, I have a hand that's free to pick them up. When I have one handful and someone else does something awesome, I have one hand free to give them a high five. My life is not consumed by two handfuls of my stuff. When I have one handful, I can praise God. Life with one handful is better than life with two. So, I hope that you'll travel light this Christmas. I hope that you'll experience this life that is marked by contentment and joy, patience and peace, and tranquility.
I hope that this has been a meaningful experience for you, even online. And I want you to know that every time that we get together, both online and in person, we include a time of communion. This is a moment for people who follow Jesus to look back on life and remember with gratitude all the amazing things that God has done, our need for God right now, and to look forward with hope, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. So now is the time to get some food and drink to represent Jesus' body and his blood that was broken and poured out for each and every one of us. And during that time, we're going to reflect together. If you don't follow Jesus, that's totally okay. I'm glad that you're checking out this video. Go ahead and use this time to reflect on what you've heard so far. And with that, let's focus on the love of Jesus together. Before you turn off this video, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, and share button. And I want you to know that this video, this isn't the church. You are. So this week, I hope that you go and make a difference, that you go and be the church.